Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
These are supposed to be local newscasts, but they're being commandeered by Sinclair's politically conservative owner. The corporate interference is bad, and it's getting worse. That's what I'm hearing from anchors and reporters at Sinclair Broadcast Group stations from coast to coast. They are coming out of the woodwork, mostly speaking anonymously, but definitely speaking their mind about the right-leaning agenda that they say is forced on them by the company's corporate headquarters. Now, all week, ever since the Sinclair controversy became national news, I've been asking Sinclair executives to come here, to come on this program and address these questions. They have declined, but I do have a new statement from the company. We'll get into that. First, a little background about Sinclair. It's the country's largest operator of local TV stations. It either owns or operates almost 200 of them across the country. And right now, it's looking to widen its influence by buying Tribune Media's TV stations. As you know, Sinclair has been taken to task for those controversial media-bashing promos that went viral this time last week. And this was originally compiled by Deadspin. Then it became widely covered by CNN, MSNBC, all the major networks. Now, we've heard from some of the anchors at these stations who say they were embarrassed they had to participate, and even a few said they refused. Here's an example from Norma Holland in Rochester, New York. She went ahead and participated. She had some regrets, it sounds like. She says, look, people could have chosen to quit, but who among us has an alternate career in their back pocket ready to go? I have a family to support. That's not an excuse. That's reality. That's what I've heard from other staffers as well who say, yeah, they're looking toward the exit. They might want to leave Sinclair, but they can't leave, at least not right now. And there's also contractual reasons. My next guest is here to explain that because he left Sinclair and then they sued him. Jonathan Baden is a former reporter at WPEC. That's the CBS affiliate in West Palm Beach, Florida, owned by Sinclair. Jonathan joins me now. So Jonathan, you're now the president of Inside Advantage PR. What happened to you when you left Sinclair?
Well, basically, when I walked into HR, they told me, if you do this, we're going to rain down hell on you unless you pay us $25,000 to get out of your contract. I was making $44,000 a year, Brian, so of course, as a 24-year-old, I couldn't cut him a check for $25K. And I told management, look, I am mentally fatigued and I'm physically fatigued. I don't like this culture of chaos, and I want out. And they told me, basically, no, you're going to stay unless you pay us the $25K. I talked to my attorney, I left, and before the statute of limitations was up, 3 years later, last October, they filed a lawsuit in Orange County, Florida court for $5,700, which is basically a rounding error for a company like Sinclair. It's nothing. But for somebody like me, $5,700 is something.
I imagine. So you're suing them. What's the current status?
Well, about 3 months ago in mediation, just a few hours before the hearing in Orange County Court, their sleazeball attorney down in Miami phoned me to say, hey, $1,700, cut us a check, you get out of it. And at that point, I was thinking maybe I should just go ahead and acquiesce and sign on the dotted line, until he told me, well, we have to produce a gag order where you sign a statement saying you can't talk to the press, you can't talk in public about Sinclair, about your former company, if we want this to go away. And that's when I told him to go jump in a lake, and ever since then, they've been unresponsive.
Sinclair's response to me a few minutes ago was, hey, this type of contractual language is standard in our industry. Frankly, though, I think a lot of people have been surprised to hear about how onerous it is. And now I see there's actually an editorial in the Providence Journal from a former Sinclair anchor saying these deals need to be fixed, free the reporters and anchors from these contracts. I also want to know from you, Jonathan, what you experience in terms of bias at the station. Just how prevalent is this conservative bias that creeps into coverage?
Well, it comes from the top down, Brian. It comes straight from corporate, where, you know, MSNBC, everyone knows they lean left. Fox News, they lean right, like it or not. But with Sinclair, what makes this so insidious is they focus on small to mid-sized markets throughout the U.S., from Macon, Georgia to Bozeman, Montana. And they focus on the person who works 12, 14 hours a day, comes home, maybe catches the last 15 minutes of the 6 o'clock news. Then they feed feed, whatever conservative bias they have. And this can be as simple as must-runs at the end of the show, or it could be copy that is fed from Sinclair headquarters just outside of Baltimore to like one lone producer inside the studio. And then it also infects journalists because they tell you what stories you can or can't do and what angles you must take.
And this has been going on for years. Let's be clear. You left Sinclair a number of years ago.
Sure.
What I keep hearing from staffers who are currently at these stations is that it feels like it's getting more oppressive. That this is something that seems to be increasing now that President Trump is in office. Let me bring in one other voice, Jonathan. Olivia Nuzzi is still here with me from New York Magazine. And Olivia, you had an interesting experience with the chairman of Sinclair, David Smith, the longtime CEO. Let's put on screen part of what he said to you in an email message. This was kind of wild. You went ahead and published this for New York Magazine recently. He said to you that the print media is so left-wing as to be meaningless dribble, which accounts for why the industry is and will fade away. Just no credibility. What did this tell you about Sinclair's bent?
Well, they need a copy editor, first of all. I think he meant meaningless drivel. But it is pretty shocking to see. It's not shocking anymore to us to hear from a far-right politician, somebody running for office, these very anti-media sentiments, but from a very prominent, powerful media executive in America, which he is, even if he is sort of under the radar, he was until recently. It's shocking to hear something so just a blanket statement condemning the media. And I had been talking to people at Sinclair in the fall, and at the time the big issue were those must-run segments that they would air overnight. People were embarrassed by them, and when he said that to me, I didn't quite know what to make of it. And Deadspin, I think it's pretty extraordinary the way that Deadspin, with this viral video, was able to turn this into a mainstream story, this kind of obscure, difficult to understand thing about contracts and
local markets.
Exactly, local markets and how important local news is. Like my Aunt Diane watches a woman named Jamie Stelter every day, it's very important to her.
Well, look, I'm always reminded by my wife, by her work in New York here, that local journalism has such an effect, an emotional connection to people.
Exactly.
When they stop her on the street, it's because they spend every morning with her.
Exactly. You develop a relationship with the people who are giving you the weather, the traffic report, telling you about local crimes. And so I think the way that this has morphed into this very mainstream story that we're talking about in the way that we are now is pretty extraordinary. And also that the president chimed in the way that he did.
And took Sinclair's side.
Exactly. It's alarming. It's very, very alarming.
Jonathan, real quick, what do you want to see Sinclair do differently? Just if you could give advice right now to the head of the company.
I'd tell them to pull their head out of their ass and start treating their employees well. I mean, when I was with Sinclair, it was a culture of misogyny and xenophobia, and I don't want to see my former colleagues who are still working for Sinclair have to continue to sustain that. And furthermore, I want the young journalists to know out there that, hey, look at who you're applying for when it comes to jobs and do your research. Same with the people who watch in all of these small to mid-sized markets in the U.S. So I would tell Sinclair to get their act together.
Jonathan, thanks for being here. Olivia, thanks for sticking around. And let me just reiterate, Sinclair folks, you got my number. Call me. I'd love to have you on the program next week.